So, Chris, uh, I'm
So
hi
Rob,
everyone. I'm Rob Sanchez. I'm with Mouth Media Network, and I'm here with Chris Joyce. Chris is the founder of Gusher, and Chris has been there as a mentor for me, basically from the beginning of my entrepreneurship career,
I hate that
or at
word,
least
Rob.
very, very early on. I know, and that's why it's fun. So, what I wanted to do is just kind of dive in with Chris and have him talk a little bit about his background, what got him started, and kind of go from there and learn from there. So, Chris, tell us about yourself.
That, just an over. Well,
That's
I
the
was
ultimate
born.
cop out as an interviewer.
Uh,
Yeah, but I'd love to have you talk about some of the early companies that you built
okay,
and what your experience was like, what you were thinking at the time, and kind of get into a little bit about like the actual like on the ground feel of that.
sure. Well, I set out in business in a way that was fundamentally different than most people view business. Okay. So even from the very beginning, the companies that I started, whenever I started a business, I always wanted to do, after I mastered that, something else. I wanted to go on to something else completely different. And so after a while, you kind of run out of completely different stuff. So you end up forming what I form now. But in the beginning stages, you know, my first businesses that I ever really did were primarily still software and technology driven from the start, although different types of technologies. And so, in my early 20s, we ran something called audio text companies, which was basically certain voicemail systems, stuff like that. But then that actually gave really a segue to a business brokerage. I ran one of the largest business brokerages, started it from scratch. But that became a golden handcuffs deal, which in your 20s is very easy to walk away from when it doesn't do what it's supposed to. But it was very profitable. It did what it was supposed to in terms of the initial goals. But I was just bored. I always would go ahead and seek out the next idea, something completely different. And so, it wasn't like the next consumer goods company and then the next consumer goods company and the next consumer goods company. Because after a while, you do three, four, five of those things, and they're all the same. They follow the same basic template, the same basic format, other than the product and maybe the people DNA. So I was always really trying to do new things or something that hadn't been done. I never wanted to do what somebody had already done before. And that's the way I viewed companies or the formation of them.
So, when you were thinking about something new, was that the way you said it just now? I just wanted to dive into. Is
Sure.
it like new for you or new for the world?
Kind of both. So let me give you an example, even a rudimentary example. At the beginning of my business career, I started a business brokerage. But the point wasn't to create a standard business brokerage. This point was to create a new model of the business brokerage. So even in a way with that company, we were disrupting a standard industry and it took off. The only problem, it wasn't duplicable. Even though the model worked, it wasn't something that could be scaled. So, we ended up killing it purposely in terms of what we do. So it's not just new for me. It's really trying to create something that fundamentally hasn't been created before. That's really what gets my juices flowing. That's why I've never done real estate oriented deals. I just find them boring as hell when it comes to the creation. I mean, really, you laugh,
Yeah.
but I mean, Rob, you know this. They're just boring. They're boring as hell.
Well, the funny thing is that that's my passion right now. So,
Well, you're boring then.
yeah, yeah. What I love and what I gravitated towards, I still haven't like actually done it boots on the ground, but it's like basement systems,
Yeah.
um, where there's all these houses out there that no one will touch because the basements are screwed up, and
Yeah.
that's like a complex, like crazy engineering problem. Like, how do you solve a basement issue in a 10 out of 10 flood zone, um,
Yeah, but
and
see, then
what's the
then to me,
design
that's
to
not a
it?
real estate deal.
Yeah,
Okay. Real estate is just a vehicle, but you're really figuring out the technology or the model process. And so, yeah, that's something where, look at, I'm even getting goosebumps. That gets my juices flowing because it's not okay. Well, let's put a pool together and do a syndicate and whatever. I'm just, you know,
yeah, yeah. Got it. So what are some of the things you did after the business brokerage?
Sure. Well, a very big one that was extremely well known was a company called Osolo Foods. And that was really a consumer goods. We ended up being the largest manufacturer of low carbohydrate bread products, breads, muffins, everything else. And even though that may sound like a baking company, it really wasn't. It was an extremely technically oriented company where basically what we did is we were able to take water and give it the texture of bread, which is an extremely difficult thing to do. And so we were everywhere. I mean, we were literally in more than 11,000 stores, 23 countries. We were all over the place. And so that was very, very interesting, but it taught me a very, very important lesson. And that lesson really was, and it's a hard thing to do, but you never want to build on other people's platforms. So at the
Mhm.
time, there was a gentleman by the name of Robert Atkins, Dr. Atkins, that basically was riding the wave of low carb, and we were really riding his tails. So even though we had a product, we had a market, we had everything else that was completely kind of separate from that. When he passed away, the whole industry imploded. I mean, it literally almost overnight imploded. It went from 13 to 17% of the population being on low carb to really less than 1%. And so it was a very interesting thing to go through. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
What was the process like of starting a food oriented company?
Sure. Well, at the time, I was completely flat broke. I mean, I had absolutely nothing. I remember it to this day. I had nothing. I had to borrow from a friend $1,200 to basically try to finagle a lease. Now, in the very beginning stages, literally, I was trying to play around with recipes and everything else, but it just didn't work at all. I mean, literally, I didn't have the skill set. So what I ended up doing is hunting down food chemists, which at the time I did through the AOL membership directory. And I had
Mhm.
literally hundreds of food chemists that told me it couldn't be done. It shouldn't be done. They told me to go F myself because they were absolutely against low carbohydrate diets. I mean, it was literally, a lightning rod at the time. And with all those no's, I knew I was onto something because if people felt that vehemently for or against or whatever it may be, that's the place to be. I mean, especially when it comes to publicity, I knew if I was able to create that product that would get extreme publicity for free. And then, sure enough, I had met a partner. I basically recruited him online. I didn't meet him until about a year or two later, after we were already in a lot of stores and pumping it. But in the beginning stages, it was literally lying on a factory floor. I finagled a machine for nothing because I had nothing from a manufacturer
Mhm.
right here in Philadelphia. And the lease itself, I lucked out. I walked into a place and the landlord who used to manufacture machines for baking industry, like Nabisco when it was called Nabisco,
Yeah.
Oreo machines, Nilla wafers. He made those machines. He said, I said, oh, how much is the place? And I literally to this day, it'll basically, it's just stuck in my mind. He said $1,200 for you. And literally, I had $1,200 on me. And so I took the place. I had nothing else. All right. I had no packaging. I had no materials. I had nothing. And then basically, I started making calls. I got ingredients for free. I got labels for free, on the promise of future business that, you're building up this manufacturing company. And then sure enough, about 6, 7 months later, an article comes out about us. And that's when everything fucking exploded. It was just a straight up, shot in terms of what we were doing.
Yeah.
And I did it with nothing basically, other than that $1,200.
Yeah. Um, so this is like, why did you do it the hard way?
Is there another way? Is there another
um,
way?
yeah, yeah. I have no idea. Um,
I
the question isn't just like why was it difficult to do,
yeah.
but it's like why did you choose to go so far out that there was no safety net, that there was nothing?
You know, I don't know necessarily if it's a function of perhaps how I'm wired. That could be one aspect of it,
Yeah.
okay? But I really fundamentally have a distaste for the status quo. I have an extreme distaste for what I call mediocrity. in terms of business. And so with very safe models, usually with safe comes, very limited upside potential. It just does. And I felt like, I had always pushed the envelope of taking on that risk. And not to toot my own horn, but you don't take that risk and make it every time. If anything, you get put into the meat grinder, smashed up, and you're underneath the mountain the vast majority of times. But what that does is it's like taking metal and putting it into the furnace. Yes, it's fucking hot. Yes, it's brutally hard on that metal. But what ends up happening is it changes the metal. It turns it into fundamentally a different product. And that's how you get metal or steel that's tempered, is by having it in that heat for a very long period of time. And that's what I equate to starting a business. It makes you so that you're able to handle things much differently. And so those pressures, that negativity, the downside, it's just a walk in the park. I was telling my kid the other day, he's like, how come you're the way you are? We were talking about something else. And I go, well, I feel natural in emergency situations where all the shit's hitting the fan. The rest of it drives me bonkers. I'm sitting there going, okay, when it's boring, what the hell do I do now? But in emergency situations, I feel absolutely calm.
Yeah, I get that a little bit. Like I like early in my career, I was trying to figure out where I'd be happy, and it's like I kind of want to ride the ship down,
Yeah.
like I'm good at that.
Yeah.
And then it took my wife being like, "Yeah, but I don't want to be on that ride." you know?
Well,
Um,
that's the hard balance. I mean,
yeah,
when you're in a relationship, you have kids, everything else, you know, how much risk do you take on? So that's definitely a vicious walk that you have to
yeah,
take as a couple.
yeah. Um, so in the
And I'm
food
not good
industry,
at that, by the way.
yeah, yeah. We're still figuring it out over here. Um, we'll get there, right?
Yeah.
So like,
One way or the
what's
other, we'll get
next?
there.
What's next for you? What stopped the food country company? You talked about Atkins.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
Well, we were like that company was its own. It didn't lose money, but at the stage we were at, we had to discontinue. So we had built up large scale factories, and we weren't really ready for, let's say, a reduction in the market size at 95, 98%. We were going in the other direction. So we were building for capacity. And so we weren't going to go ahead and let's say we're doing 50 mil to go ahead and backdoor ourselves, 2 million, 3 million. It didn't make sense.
yeah.
And the market took a very long time to come back. I mean, it didn't come back for 10, 15 years.
Was there a retooling opportunity or anything like that, or did it was done?
At that stage, it was pretty much done because we had agreements with very large companies I can't really mention, very large fast food companies to go ahead and create products. So we had built out, 50,000 square foot plants to be able to handle that. And, you don't go back to, custom or craft manufacturing. And for me, myself, I had already done it. It's like, okay, we've been here, we've been to this level, we've worked this industry inside and out, on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, on to the next thing.
So what was that next thing?
The next thing really was primarily a medical device. So we had created a once a day spray for menopausal hot flashes that eventually we ended up selling out. So we were able to go ahead, get that into the marketplace, put it out there. It's a product that was really functional. It was cool. And I had never done a medical device, more or less an over the counter type of the medical device that we're hitting what we considered a very large market in a different way. But literally that got sold to a very large scale company. So
Yeah. So as far as like that, was that your idea? Was it
it was
technology you
not
fell in love with, or what?
same thing as before. So, I follow pretty much a template in terms of certain company creations. So I'll come up with the idea, but I'm not sitting there creating the tech. So that's something where the idea of using phase change material, I came across an article in, I can't remember what the hell it was, regarding sheetrock. And in sheetrock, they started putting phase change material. So phase change material is something that changes phases. Water is a phase change material. If you boil it, it changes to a gas. If you freeze it, it changes to a solid. Well, when they put phase change material, which for lack of a better word, it can be certain waxes, whatever it may be, when they put it in the sheetrock, instead of the HVAC system going like this, spikes up and down, it went like this, more of rolling curves, and it made it extremely energy efficient. So,
Mm,
I had the theory that if we took phase change material, we could then go ahead and create something for really a regulation of the body temperature to then actually have impact that would have something for hot flashes. So I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know if it was complete and utter insanity or not. But I sought out people that could go ahead and create that solution using that as the basic concept.
yeah.
And then I bring them into the deal. I mean, that's literally what you do.
Yeah. Okay. And so then that was the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. Um,
There's been a lot,
s-
Rob. You know
yeah,
that.
yep. So now what are you doing that brings you that same like feeling?
Sure. Well, it's with Gusher, what we're doing right now. Did you want me to go into that or not go into
Yeah,
that?
you
Or?
can go into that. Yeah, let's go
Yeah,
into
sure.
that.
So Gusher itself is a platform to launch companies without the need for money. So what happens is I took what I had done many times over the course of decades in terms of the creation of companies, and I said, okay, well, is there a way to really show people how to do this? Is there a way to make this available to anyone to be able to create a company? You don't need money to create a company. You just need primarily people. And so people join companies in exchange for performance based equity, and that's the way the companies are formed. So, right this second, when I'm dealing with Gusher, here, I'll give an example. So, we're ended up dealing with this is one of our companies or one of our founders. It's a company called Sustainable Grain. They create a circular economy system for a consumer good. They're targeting women that are a certain age and income for basically a certain type of Gatorade competitor, and they're off to the races. So my whole day is spent dealing with founders, dealing with companies in all different ranges, everything from B2B, B2C, B2B2C, and everything in between, from consumer goods, manufacturing, SaaS, fintech, AR, VR, AI, gaming, medical devices, prop tech, you name it, we've got it. And so that's what keeps my mind going and keeps the ability to go ahead and keep, utilizing it in that way. And that's where the expertise comes from.
Yeah. So over the last couple years, you and I have like sat down and had a parade of people through and just like problem solved.
Yeah.
For me,
We're
that's
good
like
at it, Rob.
that's been a lot of fun. Um, is that like why you're doing this? Not like to do it with me. I mean, clearly that's a given. But I mean, like, are you doing this because you want those ideas flowing through and like want that fun? Like, what's that like driving purpose there?
Well, when I was a kid growing up in Ohio, and I don't know if I ever told you this, Rob, okay, is that I saw my mom stuck in a catch 22. All right. She was in a very bad marriage. All right. And she was also a low level secretary for the government. She was a GS5. So here she is having these great ideas stuck in the middle of Ohio where there's no venture capital ecosystem. There's literally no way to get it off the ground. A female in the 80s, 70s, basically trying to figure a way to start companies. And she was really in a vicious catch 22. All right. That always stuck with me. That was something that just, I said, somebody shouldn't be in that position. But flash forward to years later, I was at a meeting of Nelson Mullins down in DC, a law firm there. And I came across a similar scenario where there was a bunch of these entrepreneurs that they weren't wearing hoodies and attended Stanford. They didn't look like everyone else. They didn't talk like everyone else. And their chances of getting capital, even though their ideas were brilliant, was non-existent. So
Yeah.
they had less than a 1 in 1,000 chance of being able to get capital to get those companies off the ground. So I said, I wonder if there's a way to take the system that I've done, what I do here, put it into a platform. So I talked to one of my partners. We gusher. We drank our own Kool-Aid, and the rest is basically history. So that's how we came up with it. But the initial motivation is my mom.
Hmm. That's awesome. Um, what have you been able to do with it so far?
Well, we've got more than 250 different companies, as I said, in all different verticals. In terms of the companies right now, they're just starting to pump out. They're coming to market, the first companies that were on Gusher from a year or two ago. So they're actually coming to fruition. So now what they're doing is they're almost in a way, I don't want to say graduating, but they're getting to different stages. So
Mhm.
instead of trying to figure out manufacturing, it's, hey, Chris, we're switching our manufacturing from this type, to that type. Hey, Chris, how do we get this investor in? How do you help us close and do this? But it's really just standardizing processes now to help them be successful versus being launched. So launch and being successful are two very different things. So getting a company started, yes, when somebody joins your company, we think that's a form of market validation. That's higher than anything else when they're coming in for performance-based equity, but it still doesn't mean that they're not going to hit roadblocks or something along the way. Ours is really just to help them navigate those. So that stuff changes. It doesn't matter whether it's a SaaS company, whether it's a consumer goods company. They all have different problems at different stages.
Yeah. So when you're working in the startup phase, um, that process is basically like helping people get out of their own way to a degree, or like what's their, because it's a
Yeah,
huge leap to go from like I have to raise money to build a company to I can do it without
ready to
money.
go. Right.
Yeah.
And well, certain founders, that's a mental hurdle. And I was just talking to one yesterday, and he was fixed that he had to have this money. And I'm like, listen, I go, you can literally start it right this second. So when we got off the phone, it took him a couple hours. Some founders, it takes days for that to kind of sink in. But really, what happens is the hardest part, the most difficult part of creating a company using performance based equity is recruiting the first person. Once that first person is recruited, okay, it's kind of like they know suddenly now it can be done. It's suddenly like they do have the ability to go ahead and make this happen. And so whether they had money or not, still that is the phase. They're going to have to recruit. So when you're recruiting without money, it is fundamentally different. It's more like dating. And so what I say to founders is you don't need a team. What you need is fundamentally the right team for you. And so usually those team members that come on, they're people from that specific industry, or they're people that have that very specific problem. They understand that problem. The example I give always is Colin of Happy Howl. He started a dog food company, and I won't go into the details of it. Very red ocean industry, something that's brutal to be able to launch a dog food company in. And his first team imploded. I mean, literally, they were made up of people that had managed 50, 100, $200 million budgets. But his second team all had something in common that the first team didn't. And I'll ask you real quickly, what do you think it was, Rob? I mean, it's a dog food company, not a
Dogs
triple.
probably.
Right. They didn't have children. They were dog parents, all of them. So they
Yeah.
think dog, they ate dog, they breathe dog, they shit dog, they got dogs, they are dog zealots. And so that's the way a company really comes together on Gusher. And that's, even if it doesn't come together on Gusher, that's the type of team that you want to have. You want to have the people that really fundamentally get the problem and get the issue, or understand what you're trying to build. It makes a world of
Yeah.
difference.
So back in when you were doing it outside of this platform, when you were
Yeah.
doing your first deals, was that the same? Like
Well,
what was different about that versus what you're doing here?
sure. Well, what was different about that was it really took much more time. So it was extremely time consuming because, hey, you didn't have a platform like this, but still, all my companies were basically built regarding using something called whale hunting, doing outbound techniques and everything else. But the hard part was you weren't able to isolate, who it would have mattered to. So right now, it's very easy to figure out who dog lovers are, or it's
Yeah.
very easy to figure out who has background regarding specific technology companies, or whatever it may be, who has real estate experience. You can see this stuff very easily, whereas before it wasn't like that. So you're able to put together these teams very quickly, and the launch times have gotten reduced dramatically. It would take me easily a year, year and a half, 2 years to start building teams and get a company going using that beforehand. Now, the fastest I've seen it come together is 2 hours. a company
Mhm.
literally full team come together in 2 hours and get going.
Yeah.
So that's insane. I mean, that's
Was that just like how tight that industry was, or like what do you think was
well,
that?
I can't give away the secret sauce on
Yeah.
it, but there was a way to recruit specifically for that in a rapid fashion. On
Yeah.
average, even now, it takes 8 weeks. I mean, it doesn't take very, very long times to go ahead and do this. So that's been reduced by at least 25 times. I mean, it's
Yeah.
literally compacted in terms of what's out there, and that's a result of the information that's out there that wasn't there before. You know,
Yeah. So you've done this with like a phone book, and now you're doing it with the internet.
exactly.
Um, do you have a preference?
In terms of whale hunting or a pull
Yeah,
mechanism,
yeah.
push versus pull.
Like one of the things that happens now is there's just so many more people out there doing this.
Right, right.
And like what was there something about the old days that you liked better?
Honestly, I'm one of those people that don't look back. I mean, there are aspects of it like that I like. So, for
Yeah.
example, you pick up a phone, it was very different. Okay, now it's a question of how to get in touch. But let me say something. Having said that, I deal with a lot of outbound to investors. And so even now, my emails have an insanely high open rate, even if I don't have a connection with them ahead of time. So almost in a way, nothing's changed. If anything, it's gotten better if you know the right way to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're sending a mass email or something and you're sending it to 500 investors, that's not the way to do it. Okay.
Right. Right.
Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. It reminds me early days with Mouth Media, we'd have all exec audiences and they weren't necessarily people we knew,
Right.
but it was like one on one even when we scaled it.
Yeah.
It still was one on one. It still was like every single person that was in the room had been personally invited with an email for them.
Yep. And
Um,
and there's something to be said about that because when you're dealing with 90% plus closing rates, which is typically what you do when you're doing with the one-on-one, it's something that definitely pays for itself. And it has a lot more impact and it creates deeper relationships, which then has ripple effect going out God knows how far. So the fact of the matter is doing that not scalable stuff. I mean, you and I have talked about that before doing
yeah,
the not scalable stuff, the unscalable shit is what leads to the scalable stuff. And I don't care what business it is, it almost always starts out as something that's not scalable. That process that you're doing in the beginning stages is not scalable. I mean, I'm looking at this smooch can. All right. Well, they didn't make their first product that way. They went ahead and created it, basically filling bottles by hand with batch processing. And
yeah,
where did he sell it? He sold it at farmers markets, one on one. And what did that give him? It gave Matt Peterson. It gave him the objections. It gave him the ability to see and interact with the customers, so he could identify his customer better. It let him see what messages were resonating with his customers. That doing something removed, it doesn't give that. It doesn't
yeah,
give that at all. Just because Facebook says it's a list of people that have this qualities and this characteristics doesn't mean it's a list of this people with this qualities and this characteristics.
yeah. It's maybe one of the cleaner marketplaces right now, but it's still like,
Dude.
yeah, it's still a
Yeah,
lot out there.
no doubt about
Um,
it.
yeah, one of the questions too is like the exponential growth of spam on LinkedIn. Like, what's
Oh
going
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
happen next, and like, is this going to change? So, it'll be interesting to figure out that side of that because it is this great recruiting marketplace, but it's
Yeah.
also like a very noisy place. I
Well,
find myself every inbound, it's like, do I actually know this person, or are they going to sell me in the first 30 seconds after I accept their
right,
inbound?
and I mean they have right now. They have so many automated tools. Ooh, sorry about that, Rob. They have so many automated tools that make it appear that it is, but you can still tell that they're bots. And so the fact of the matter is, I mean, I get a tremendous amount of LinkedIn requests, and I don't accept many of them. What I look for is something that's an aberration where I know that it is customized. Or I know that they left it off for some way. If it's something that's washed and it's a general message, I just don't accept it.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. Um, So what's kind of on your mind right now about companies and trends and like is there something that you want someone to tackle? I guess is
I'd
kind
like
of
a
what
new
I'm wondering.
search engine.
Yeah.
I really would. I would like a new search engine. I mean, I could talk about technology and it being semi-monopolized or in a way going down that road. I'm kind of sick and tired of seeing SaaS companies that have a very specific, almost in a way, product that is really just a feature versus a platform. But one of the things that you touched on with LinkedIn, I think there's a massive need for I don't even know if it's really a new type of social media platform. I don't even know if that word fits anymore, but there should be a place where deals can happen and deals can happen organically without all that noise.
Yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
hard part that's coming out. So, are people going to fractionalize it? Are there going to be splinters of it? I don't know, but I think I'd like to see it. The other thing is I don't like it where you have the your tribe or whatever it may be you want to call it, yet you're on these other platforms that dominate your tribe. So in effect, you're a serf. You're serfdom here in terms of what your business model is. I think that's fundamentally the wrong move. I think you have to build your own platform or your own point of business wherever that is.
Yeah. There's this interesting trend in the VC community where there's investment in community, like not in platform, not in tech, but like people.
Yeah,
And I'm kind of wondering like what's that going to look like? Because right now it's like, do I use Facebook? Do I use
right.
Discord? Do I use and there's all these questions about like what's the digital, do I go in the metaverse? What's the digital space that I hold these communities in? But the communities themselves have this tremendous value. So it's
Yeah,
going to
but
be interesting to see like what happens once investment starts flooding into that space.
I've been thinking about community in a different way. Okay. So
Magic Bus.
yes and no. Okay. Now for all of you, you don't have know our inside joke, but that's one of Rob's and our theories.
That was us being stuck in an airport post blizzard,
Oh my God. Right.
and just like I think we said we could come up with a company on the spot, and you're like, yeah, let's do it, and we just like brainstormed a company, and that was Magic Bus. So
I still think it's valid now, especially with post COVID. But hear me out. So you're talking about community, right? Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but data says that with companies anyway, the second that you get past, and even like the community, Amish communities and whatever else it is, once you get past, I can't remember if the magic number is 50 or 100, but once you get past it, it's no longer a community. So, you're creating these communities of, that are way larger than 50, 100 people. And they're not really communities. They're just really the distribution of information. So I wonder if almost in a way, a rethink or some way of looking at a community in a different way needs to be done. And I don't know the solution. I'm just talking it out.
yeah, yeah. Well, there's one I'm playing with right now in the real estate space,
Okay.
um, which is like so I'm brokering loans,
Okay.
and what I was looking at was like, well, I need stable cash flow like, and
Yeah.
predictable cash flow, and I'm charging pretty high fees on closing. So there's a model where I could build a community of investors that work together
Right.
where I just like you pay to be in it and I just handle all of the loans. And then I don't need to be paid, per close.
And then nobody can attack you.
Yeah.
Then you have your customer base right there. Then you have something that's scalable and buildable, and that's the right
Yeah.
way to do it. And guess
And then
what?
what you do is like you add a new market, you don't increase the size of the community. There's like
Right,
that cap where like you don't need more than 40 people.
right.
Yeah.
But what that covers a lot of different things there. But also what I really I think this is extremely important. And I've done this with businesses because I always hated it. And this is going to be off, but it's going to make sense. So let's say I get a product into Walmart. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Walmart has a policy with most of their buyers that they rotate every year or two. So that means that you can't establish a relationship with them. so that you end up having to pitch them every year or two a product, which allows them to brutalize you, bend you over, and basically that's it. So with something like Walmart, if you build your business on Walmart, that one buyer decides to say no, your business evaporates overnight.
Yeah.
Your business with the model that you're describing can't evaporate. So literally, you can still build on it, and those incremental builds add up. That's what I
Yeah.
like about it. It adds up. It's having a true book of business in the common vernacular.
Yeah. It reminds me of people who were like dress shop owners and stuff like that, where it was like the book of business
Yes.
and that was all that mattered. And then you literally sell your book. When you wanted to retire, you'd sell your book.
Right.
And it's that same idea. It's like I need 200 people in this town of 50,000, and if they're my 200, then I'll be a millionaire, you know.
Right. There you go. And that's really the way to think. And I wonder, I always hear people, talking about new models and all these other things, but that fundamental philosophy, that fundamental thesis in a way, that is something that pretty much anybody can do in almost any vertical. you
Yeah.
know? And it's just a question of, okay, are you expanding your reach? Are you expanding your geography? Are you expanding whatever? And then you rotate the bottom out, the bottom production to basically keep your higher profit people in, and you just scale that way. You scale the
Yeah.
monetary side.
Do you remember a conversation about plumbers?
No,
This
what
was
did
a
we talk
long
about?
time ago. We were talking about how like you could basically buy local plumbers
Do a roll up?
and roll them up
Yeah.
and turn it to a subscription model,
Yep.
and you can run plumbing companies where you just show up and get your toilet fixed.
Yeah.
And it's like all the maintenance is done, everything, because you would have enough cash flow in the system
Yeah.
to stabilize, and you wouldn't be bidding per job.
Right. So why is nobody doing that? Why is nobody
It's
taking
hard.
that and at least doing a test? I mean,
Yeah.
it takes nothing to do a
Yeah.
test. Nothing. It's
Yeah.
okay. Let's go ahead and establish the contracts. We were also talking about that with septic systems.
Yeah.
All right, because there's always a guy with a truck emptying the poop out of your septic system. But the fact of the matter is, you could do a roll up with that, then use that as a segue into the other services. Do it as a low monthly cost versus having to come out,
Yeah.
and pay the annual or biannual fee, which ends up hitting it. And you have a steady stream of cash flow that can then be utilized for other things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I think that
Same roll up.
roll-ups might be fun to play with for a little
We
while.
should do a roll up, Rob.
Yeah.
We could do the
I
shit.
think it'd be awesome. Yeah.
I'm
It'd be
serious. We
great.
should.
It'd be great. For me, it's like the Midwest play, right? There's just so many overlooked markets.
There's a lot of there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
I've
have you
become
driven across
fascinated with.
country recently at all or no?
It's been quite a few years.
Dude, all there is cranes. I mean, there's cranes fucking everywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
and it is really, really, it's really grown.
Yeah.
Really grown.
And like that's one of the things that was fascinating me about the basements is like I know what equipment you would need.
Yeah.
I know what and I know how many houses are out there too. It's like in Connecticut, there was a rock quarry that provided the stone for most of the basements, and there was some chemical in the rock causes them to dissolve.
Really?
And so there's like 10,000 homes or something like that up there.
Holy
It's like
shit.
the entire book of business from this quarry
Yeah.
where they're all crumbling. And there's government money, and you can literally go in, jack the house, tear it out, replace it. That when I hear that, it's just like, oh my God, that would be so much fun to try and like just go buy all those houses. Or even if you don't buy them, at least like be the system. Because if you
Yeah.
get that down, I mean, there's like techniques you can do that most people who you're bidding for the jobs on aren't going to tell you about, that reduce the man hours on a job like that to almost nothing.
That's the way to do it. I mean, again, you're bringing something new to something that almost in a way is old, and that's the way to think because it's sitting right in your backyard. It's local almost in a way because that's not too far away from where you are, and you could
Yeah.
hit the ground running, But But on
Yeah.
any of the, like we just discussed, 3, 4 ideas right there that, no offense, they're not just $1 million ideas. They're at least 50 million, 100 million ideas. Maybe there's something more, who knows? But 50 million to $100 million to most people, that's something there. That's something worth going after, you know?
Yeah.
That's cool stuff.
That's why this is fun.
It's a
The
lot.
other side is like, how do you get the hours to do each one of them? That's
Well,
the
yeah, but the question is, how's payment on that? Because
yeah,
isn't the cash flow coming somewhat first? Isn't
yeah,
something coming from that? Now, if you're purchasing the properties, not necessarily. If it's a service of that property, then definitely. Or if there's whatever, I don't know if there's government funding on it, but that would be part of it. Well, then the money's coming. Then you have
yeah,
a spread that you can figure out the loans on, you know?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that second piece has been pretty fascinating. Like, so I was talking with Julie, my wife, about doing wholesaling,
Okay.
and then I got to thinking like, there's a captive market with people who have cash, but there's also this like entire market of people who want to do this and just don't know how to get the funding.
Right.
So instead of me building a wholesale business first, why don't I build a loan business, like a brokering business first?
Right.
So then when I'm out there, it's just like anybody who wants to buy a home, if I have a home, they can buy it. So that was like the first thing in my head. And then I just became so fascinated with brokering. And it's like so many things become available once you have those loans.
No doubt.
So
But
yeah,
the other thing is that it has scale. So
yeah,
once you get to a certain point, I mean, it has real fuck you scale, where then other people take notice and funding gets a lot easier,
yep,
in that industry.
yeah.
That's cool stuff.
So we're pretty much at the end of the time. Are there
Yeah,
any
sure.
final thoughts that you want to share?
Yeah, just what I always say at the end of anything like this that has to do with founders: never give up. Never, 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 never give up. It's the only point of differentiation between success and failure is never giving up. Step into the furnace, get fried, get hardened, accept it, because that's just part of the process. It's nothing unusual. Never give up.
Did you ever see the crane that's eating the frog and the frog is choking the crane?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Got its
the
arms around its neck.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
That's the one that always pops in my mind when people say that.
Well, that's
Um,
business.
yep. Well, perfect. Thank you so much for hopping on, for talking.
My
I
pleasure.
really appreciate it. And for everyone who's on here who's going to see this or see the replay, thank you for sticking with us. And uh, we'll talk to you soon.
See ya.